Hello, Gooners, and welcome back to Arsenal Daily News, where we bring you the latest transfer news, tactical analysis, and everything Arsenal. I'm your host, and today we have some absolutely crucial stories that could shape Arsenal's season and our Premier League title challenge. We're talking about two major transfer sagas that every Arsenal fan needs to know about right now. First up, the Antoine Semenyo situation that has taken a dramatic twist. The Bournemouth winger, who was reportedly Arsenal's target, is now on the verge of joining Manchester City for £65 million. And here's the kicker that should concern every Gooner. Bournemouth wanted to face us first on January 3rd before he leaves. This is a player who wanted to join Arsenal, a player in red-hot form with 8 goals and 3 assists this season, and we hesitated. Now, he is going to our direct title rivals. But that is not all. We are also diving deep into Arsenal's pursuit of 19-year-old AC Milan sensation Davide Bartesaghi. According to reports from Gazzetta dello Sport and Team Talk, Arsenal are making the most noise behind the scenes for the 6'5" left-back, who is taking Serie A by storm. This kid scored twice against Sassuolo with clinical left-footed finishes. Sources close to the situation, including top transfer journalists, are monitoring this closely as Arsenal look to add another defensive weapon to Mikel Arteta's arsenal. These are not just random transfer rumors. These are stories that reveal Arsenal's strategy, our ambitions, and the challenges we face competing with the elite. We're going to break down every detail, analyze what this means for our title race, and discuss whether Arsenal's transfer approach is helping or hurting our championship aspirations. So buckle up, Gooners, because today's episode is packed with information you cannot afford to miss. Let's get into it. Arsenal Daily News. The Antoine Semenyo saga. What Arsenal fans need to know. Hello, Gooners, and welcome back to Arsenal Daily News. Today we are diving deep into a transfer story that could have major implications for our title race. We are talking about Antoine Semenyo, the Bournemouth winger, who is reportedly on his way to Manchester City. But here's the twist that should concern every Arsenal fan. Bournemouth wanted to face us first before he leaves. Let me break down everything you need to know about this developing situation. The transfer that could change everything. According to the latest reports, Antoine Semenyo is set to sign for Manchester City during the winter transfer window. This is not just speculation anymore. Everything indicates that the 6-time Premier League champions are prepared to pay a £65 million release clause to bring the Ghanaian international to the Etihad. Now, you might be wondering why this matters to Arsenal. Well, here is where it gets interesting and frankly a bit frustrating for us Gooners. Arsenal actually liked Semenyo. The club were open to signing the winger. But here's the kicker. Arsenal were only willing to do the deal for the 25-year-old next summer. Let that sink in for a moment. We liked the player. We were interested, but we were not willing to move now. And that hesitation might just cost us in more ways than one. The Arsenal connection nobody is talking about. There's a fascinating subplot to this story that I think deserves more attention. According to the reports, there was a sense that Semenyo's first choice would have been Arsenal. Think about that. Here is a player who is in red-hot form, scoring goals for fun in the Premier League, and he would prefer to join us over Manchester City. But it seems that Arsenal, or more specifically the North London club, are unwilling to move for him next month. Now he looks set to join our Premier League title rivals instead. And before he does, he might just remind us exactly what we are missing. Bournemouth's master plan. Here is where the story takes another interesting turn. Bournemouth are not just going to let Semenyo walk out the door without getting everything they can out of him first. According to journalist Sammy Mockbell, the Cherries are keen to make sure Antoine Semenyo remains on the south coast to face Arsenal. Arsenal travel away to the Vitality Stadium on January 3rd, and it will be thoroughly interesting to see whether we will actually face Semenyo or not. This is the kind of detail that can make or break a match, especially when you are talking about a player in the kind of form that Semenyo is currently enjoying. But there is a complication to Bournemouth's plans. The Ghanaian international could scupper these plans because he is reportedly keen to make the deal happen on the first day of 2026. That means January 1st. He wants to get to Manchester City as quickly as possible, which is understandable given the opportunity that represents for his career. However, Bournemouth seem to be pushing for the winger to remain until at least January 10th, which is a deadline for his £65 million release clause to be paid. So we have a bit of a standoff here. The player wants to leave on day one of the window. Bournemouth want to keep him for at least another 10 days, which would mean he faces both Arsenal and Tottenham. Why Semenyo is the real deal. Let me tell you why this matters so much. The winger has been on fire this season for Andoni Iraola's team. We're talking about 8 goals and 3 assists in 17 matches. Those are impressive numbers for any winger, but especially one playing for a team like Bournemouth, who are not expected to challenge at the top of the table. And it is not just about the overall numbers. Semenyo has been incredibly consistent recently. He has netted in both of his previous matches. The article mentions he scored in a 4-4 draw with Manchester United, a 1-1 draw against Burnley, and most recently against Brentford. This is a player who is clearly in a purple patch of form. He is confident, he is scoring goals, and he is doing it in the Premier League week in and week out. These are exactly the kind of performances that catch the eye of the big clubs, and clearly both Manchester City and Arsenal have been watching closely. The Arsenal dilemma. Now, Arsenal will still fancy their chances of beating Bournemouth, even with Semenyo still in the team. We are Arsenal. We are challenging for the title. We should be confident going into any game. But regardless, it would be a huge boost if Semenyo were to complete his move to Manchester City before January 3rd. Why? Because facing a player who is in the form of his life and playing what could be his final game for his current club is never easy. Players in that situation often produce something special. They want to leave on a high. They want to show the fans what they will be missing. And they want to prove to their new club that they made the right decision. What Arsenal should have done. Here is where I need to be honest with you as Arsenal fans. The article makes a compelling argument that Arsenal really should be all over the deal to sign Semenyo. And I tend to agree. Think about it this way. It feels like signing Semenyo could be the final piece of the puzzle to guarantee the Premier League title. Now, I know that is a bold claim, but hear me out. We are talking about adding one of the Premier League's most informed players to a squad that is already challenging at the top of the table. Remember what Andrea Berta and Mikel Arteta did with the Eberechi situation and Tottenham? They could have pulled off a similar coup here, but this time against our title rivals Manchester City. Can you imagine the boost it would give the team and the fan base by stealing City's #1 transfer target? It would send a statement. It would show that Arsenal are not just competing with Manchester City on the pitch, but also in the transfer market. It would demonstrate ambition and intent. And most importantly, it would add genuine quality to our squad at a crucial point in the season, the left wing conundrum. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. Arsenal are well stocked at left wing. And you are right. That is the issue. We have Gabriel Martinelli. We have Leandro Trossard. Both are quality players who have contributed significantly this season. But here is the thing that the article points out, and it is a fair point. It is still an area Arsenal are going to need to upgrade eventually. Football is about constant improvement. It's about always looking to get better. And if there's a player available who represents an upgrade, or at least serious competition, then you have to consider it seriously. The question that the article poses to fans is interesting. Imagine you can sign Antoine Semenyo right now, but only if you sell one current Arsenal winger. Who are you shipping out? It is a tough question because both Martinelli and Trossard have their strengths. But it is the kind of question that Mikel Arteta and the recruitment team should be asking themselves. The bigger picture for Arsenal. Let me zoom out for a moment and talk about what the situation tells us about Arsenal's transfer strategy. There seems to be a pattern emerging where Arsenal identify good players, but are reluctant to move for them immediately. We want to wait. We want to do deals on our terms and our timeline. Sometimes that works. Sometimes patience pays off and you get a better deal. But sometimes, as might be the case with Semenyo, that patience means you miss out entirely. And not only do you miss out, but the player ends up strengthening a direct rival. That is the worst-case scenario for any club challenging for the title. It is a double blow. You do not get the player you wanted, and your rival does. That is exactly what is about to happen here, unless something dramatic changes in the next few days. What this means for the title race. Let me be clear about something. If Antoine Semenyo joins Manchester City, it does not mean Arsenal cannot win the title. We have an excellent squad. We have a world-class manager in Mikel Arteta. We have been building towards this for years. But it does make the job harder. Manchester City are already an incredibly strong team. Adding a player in the kind of form that Semenyo is currently showing only makes him stronger. It gives Pep Guardiola another option, another weapon, another way to hurt teams. And here is the psychological aspect that cannot be ignored when a player chooses Manchester City over Arsenal. Even if Arsenal were not fully committed to signing him right now, it sends a message. It says that City are still seen as the bigger draw, the more attractive destination. That is something Arsenal need to change, not just through performances on the pitch, which have been excellent, but also through being decisive and aggressive in the transfer market when opportunities arise. The January 3rd showdown. So let us bring this back to the immediate concern. Arsenal traveled to Bournemouth on January 3rd. As it stands, there is a very real possibility that Antoine Semenyo will be playing for Bournemouth in that match. He might even be playing his final game for the club before moving to Manchester City. This is the kind of situation that can trip up title challengers. It is an away game at a tricky venue against a well-coached team. And Doni Irola has Bournemouth playing good football. They are organized. They are difficult to beat. And if they have Semenyo playing his heart out in what could be his farewell appearance, that makes them even more dangerous. Arsenal need to approach this game with maximum focus and concentration. We cannot afford to drop points, especially not to the team in the bottom half of the table. Every point matters in a title race, and we have seen in previous seasons how these kinds of games can come back to haunt you at the end of the campaign. The fan's perspective. The article includes some interesting fan comments that I think are worth discussing. One fan says they would keep Martinelli and sell Trossard, obviously, but questions whether Arsenal really needs Semenyo at all. They suggest what is really needed is cover for Declan Rice, specifically mentioning Quinton Timber. That is a fair point. Arsenal do need depth in midfield, but I would argue that adding quality in attack does not preclude also strengthening in midfield. A club with Arsenal's ambitions should be able to do both. Another fan suggests selling Trossard or the player on loan in the Bundesliga. Again, these are the kinds of debates that show how fans are thinking about squad construction and where improvements can be made. The reality is that if Mikel Arteta and the recruitment team believe Semenyo represents a significant upgrade or adds something different to what we already have, then we should be going all out to sign him. That is what ambitious clubs do. Looking ahead. So where does this leave Arsenal? Well, we have a few days before that crucial match at Bournemouth. We will find out soon enough whether Semenyo is still a Bournemouth player or whether Manchester City have moved quickly to wrap up the deal. Either way, Arsenal need to focus on the task at hand. We need 3 points from Bournemouth. We need to keep the pressure on Liverpool at the top of the table. And we need to make sure that whatever happens with the Semenyo transfer, it does not distract from our ultimate goal of winning the Premier League. But beyond this specific situation, Arsenal need to take a hard look at their transfer strategy. Are we being too cautious? Are we missing opportunities by waiting for the perfect moment? These are questions that need honest answers. The Semenyo situation is a case study in what can happen when you hesitate. We liked the player. The player apparently liked us. But we were not willing to act now, and as a result, he is going to a rival. That is not good enough for a club with our ambitions. Final thoughts. Look, I'm not going to sit here and say that missing out on Antoine Semenyo means Arsenal's season is over. That would be ridiculous. We have a fantastic squad, and we are right in the mix for the title. But I do think this situation highlights some concerns about our approach to January transfers. We seem reluctant to spend big money in the winter window. We seem to prefer waiting until summer. And while there are good reasons for that approach, there are also times when you need to be bold and decisive. This might have been one of those times. A player in outstanding form, a reasonable release clause, interest from a player. All the ingredients were there for Arsenal to make a statement signing that would have strengthened us and weakened a rival. Instead, we are left hoping that Semenyo completes his move to Manchester City before January 3rd, so we do not have to face him at his peak. That is not the position a title-challenging team wants to be in. As always, Gooners, I want to hear your thoughts. Do you think Arsenal should have moved for Semenyo? Are you worried about facing him on January 3rd? And what does this situation tell us about Arsenal's transfer strategy? Let me know in the comment below. Thanks for watching Arsenal Daily News. Make sure to like and subscribe for more Arsenal content. And remember, come on you Gunners. Arsenal Daily News, the Davide Bartesaghi story. Hello and welcome back to Arsenal Daily News. Today we're diving deep into a fascinating transfer story that's emerging from Italy, and it's one that could have significant implications for Arsenal's squad planning both in January and beyond. We're talking about 19-year-old AC Milan left-back Davide Bartesaghi, a player who Arsenal are reportedly crazy about signing. Now, before we get into the details, I want to be completely transparent with you about what we're discussing today. This is a rumor. It's being reported by Team Talk, who are citing Gazzetta dello Sport as their source. So this isn't confirmed interest. This isn't a done deal. This is what the Italian press and English media are reporting. But it's a story worth examining because of what it tells us about Arsenal's transfer strategy and the type of player Mikel Arteta is looking to bring to the Emirates. Let's start with who Davide Bartesaghi actually is. He's a 19-year-old Italian defender who plays for AC Milan, one of the biggest clubs in European football. What immediately stands out about Bartesaghi is his physical profile. This kid is 6 feet 5 inches tall. Let me repeat that, 6 feet 5 inches tall. For a full-back, that's extraordinary. That's almost unheard of in the modern game where full-backs are typically more compact, more agile, built for speed rather than aerial dominance. But Bartesaghi isn't just tall. According to the reports, he's become a mainstay in the Milan team this season. Think about what that means for a second. He's 19 years old, playing for AC Milan, one of Europe's historic giants, and he's not just getting the odd game here and there. He's becoming a regular. That's a notable achievement for a teenager at that level of football. Now let's talk about his breakthrough this season, because there's a specific moment that really caught everyone's attention. Bartesaghi scored twice in Milan's 2-2 draw with Sassuolo. Both goals were described as clinical low drives with his left foot. So not only is the 6'5" defender winning headers and defending his penalty area, he's also getting to goal-scoring positions and finishing with composure and technique. That's the kind of profile that gets Premier League clubs very excited. The report from Team Talk suggests that Arsenal are making the most noise behind the scenes when it comes to Bartesaghi. That phrase is important. Making the most noise. It suggests Arsenal aren't just casually monitoring him. They're actively interested. They're doing their homework. They're making their intentions known to the channels that exist between clubs. So, why would Arsenal be interested in a 19-year-old left-back when they already have options in that position? Well, let's look at Arsenal's current left-back situation. The report mentions that Arsenal have Riccardo Calafiori and Miles Lewis-Skelly as left-back options, with Piero Hincapié also capable of covering the role. So on the surface, it might seem like Arsenal are well stocked in that area. But here's where Arsenal's recruitment strategy becomes really interesting. Under Mikel Arteta, the club have prioritized offenders who can influence both penalty areas. Think about what that means. It's not enough to just be good defensively. Arteta wants his defenders to be threats in the opposition box. He wants them to contribute goals. He wants them to be dominant in the air at both ends of the pitch. This emphasis on structure, aerial strength, and set-piece efficiency has been central to Arsenal's success over the past couple of seasons. Arsenal have been one of the most dangerous teams in the Premier League from set pieces. That's not an accident. It's a deliberate strategy, and it requires specific types of players. You need height. You need timing. You need players who are comfortable attacking the ball in crowded penalty areas. Bartesaghi, at 6 feet 5 inches with 2 goals already to his name this season, fits that profile perfectly. He offers a rare physical presence for a modern fullback. And the fact that he's also comfortable operating as a left-wing back gives Arsenal tactical flexibility. In games where Arsenal want to be more attacking, he could push higher up the pitch. In games where they need to be more solid, he can sit deeper. The report describes Arsenal's interest as part of their established recruitment model, which combines patience with opportunism. Let's break that down, because it's crucial to understanding how Arsenal operate in the transfer market now. Patience means they're willing to track players over time. They're not making panic buys. They're not jumping on every available player. They're identifying targets and watching them develop. Opportunism means that when the right moment comes, when a player becomes available at the right price or under the right circumstances, Arsenal are ready to move quickly. We've seen this approach work with several signings over the past few years. Arsenal identify the profile they want. They monitor multiple players who fit that profile, and then they strike when the opportunity presents itself. Now, let's talk about the complications here, because there are several factors that could make this transfer difficult to pull off, especially in January. First, Milan recently tied Bartesaghi down to a new contract in May. That contract runs until 2030. 2030. That's a long-term commitment from Milan. It tells you that Milan see him as part of their future. They've invested in him. They've given him first-team opportunities. They're not a club that's desperate to sell. In fact, the report specifically states that Bartesaghi has no great inclination to leave anytime soon. Put yourself in his shoes for a moment. He's 19 years old. He's playing regularly for AC Milan. He's scoring goals. He's getting better with every game. He's living in Milan, one of the world's great cities. Why would he be in a rush to leave? He's in a perfect situation for his development right now. But here's where the reality of modern football economics comes into play. The report includes a really telling quote about the financial gap between Serie A clubs and the Premier League's elite. It says that if a player Arsenal pops up on the radar and an offer is made, there are countless and understandable financial worries Italian clubs have when it comes to incoming transfers compared to what Premier League clubs can offer. Let me translate what that means in plain English. Premier League clubs, especially the Big Six, have so much more money than Italian clubs that it creates a fundamental power imbalance in the transfer market. Milan might want to keep Bartesaghi. Milan might have him on a contract until 2030. But if Arsenal come in with an offer that's significantly higher than what Milan paid or what they think he's worth, it becomes very difficult for Milan to say no. This is the uncomfortable truth of modern football. Italian clubs, even historic giants like AC Milan, struggle to compete financially with Premier League clubs. The television money in England is just so much greater. The commercial revenues are higher. The wage budgets are bigger. So even when Italian clubs don't want to sell, sustained interest from England can be difficult to resist, as the report states. While Milan are not actively looking to sell, there is an acceptance of this reality. They know that if a Premier League club really wants one of their players and is willing to pay a premium price, it's going to be very hard to keep that player. That's just the way the market works now. So what might a January move look like for Arsenal? The report suggests it could see Bartesaghi arrive as a depth option. And here's where we need to think carefully about whether that makes sense for either party. From Arsenal's perspective, adding another left-back option gives them more flexibility. If there are injuries, if players need rest, if the fixture congestion becomes overwhelming, having another high-quality option is valuable. But from Bartesaghi's perspective, does it make sense to leave a situation where he's playing regularly for Milan to potentially be a squad player at Arsenal? Remember, Arsenal already have Calafiori, Lewis, Skelly, and Hincapie who can play left back. Where does Bartesaghi fit into that picture? Would he be getting the same amount of game time at Arsenal that he's currently getting at Milan? This is a crucial consideration for a young player. At 19, Bartesaghi is at a stage of his career where regular first-team football is essential for his development. Every game he plays, every challenge he faces, every mistake he makes and learns from, that's all contributing to his growth as a player. If he moves to Arsenal and ends up sitting on the bench more often than playing, that could actually harm his development rather than help it. The report acknowledges this tension. It says that a January move seeing him arrive as a depth option may not suit a player still developing rapidly. That's a really important point. This isn't a player in his mid-20s who's already established and can handle being rotated. This is a teenager who needs consistent playing time. So if a January move seems problematic, what about a summer move? That might make more sense for everyone involved. It would give Bartesaghi the rest of this season to continue developing at Milan. It would give Arsenal time to assess their squad needs after a full season. It would potentially give Milan time to find a replacement. Summer transfers are generally less disruptive than January moves because everyone has more time to plan. But of course, the risk for Arsenal in waiting until summer is that other clubs might enter the race. If Bartesaghi continues to perform well for Milan over the coming months, more clubs will become interested. The price might go up. The competition for his signature might intensify. So there's always a trade-off between moving quickly to secure a player and being patient to make sure the timing is right. Let's zoom out for a moment and think about what this story tells us about Arsenal's overall approach under Mikel Arteta and the recruitment team. There are several themes that keep emerging. First, they're looking young. Bartesaghi is 19. Arsenal have consistently targeted players in their early 20s, or even younger over recent windows. This isn't a club that's looking for quick fixes or short-term solutions. They're building for sustained success over many years. Second, they're looking for specific physical and technical profiles. The emphasis on height, on aerial ability, on set-piece threat, that's consistent across multiple signings. Arsenal have clearly identified that set pieces are a major weapon in the modern game, and they want to maximize their effectiveness in that area. Third, they're willing to look beyond the Premier League. Bartesaghi plays in Serie A. Arsenal have signed players from across Europe in recent years. They're not limiting themselves to what's available in England. They're genuinely scouring the continent for the right profiles. Fourth, they're thinking long-term. Even if Bartesaghi doesn't come in January, even if he doesn't come this summer, the fact that Arsenal are tracking him now means he's on their radar for the future. That's part of what the report means by patience. Arsenal might watch Bartesaghi for another year or two before making their move. They might see how he develops, whether he maintains his trajectory, whether he becomes even better. Now I want to address something important for everyone watching. We spent a lot of time discussing this story, but we need to keep perspective. This is a rumor. It's being reported by credible outlets, but it's not confirmed by Arsenal or by Milan. We don't know if formal contact has been made. We don't know if Arsenal have made an offer. We don't know what Milan's asking price would be. We don't know if Bartesaghi would even be interested in moving. What we do know is that according to these reports, Arsenal are very interested in the player. They're doing their due diligence. They're watching him closely. Whether that interest translates into an actual bid remains to be seen. The January transfer window is always chaotic. It's a difficult time to do business because clubs don't want to sell their best players mid-season. Prices are inflated. Players are cup-tied for European competitions. There's less time for new signings to integrate into the squad. So even if Arsenal are genuinely interested in Bartesaghi, it might not be the right time to make a move. What's more likely is that Arsenal are laying the groundwork now for a potential summer move or even a move further down the line. They're building relationships with Milan. They're letting the player know they're interested. They're gathering information about what would take to make a deal happen. That's smart business. That's how modern recruitment works. You don't just wake up one day and decide to sign someone. You plan months or even years in advance. So where does this leave us? Arsenal are reportedly very interested in a highly talented 19-year-old left-back who plays for AC Milan. He fits the profile of player that Mikel Arteta wants. He offers something different with his extraordinary height and aerial ability. He's showing he can contribute goals as well as defensive solidity. But he's also settled at Milan, has a long-term contract, and might not be looking to move right now. This is a story worth following over the coming months. If Bartesaghi continues to perform well for Milan, if he keeps developing at his current rate, if he becomes an even more important player for them, then the interest from Arsenal and potentially other clubs will only increase. And at some point, Milan will have to make a decision about whether they can hold on to him or whether the financial offer becomes too good to refuse. For Arsenal fans, it's another sign that the club are thinking carefully about every position. They're not satisfied with the current squad, even though it's a very good squad. They're always looking for ways to improve, for ways to add depth, for ways to bring in young talents who can grow with the club over many years. Whether Davide Bartesaghi ends up at Arsenal or not, The fact that they're looking at these kind of players should be encouraging. It shows ambition. It shows they're planning for the future. It shows they understand what kind of profiles succeed in the Premier League and under Arteta's system. That's all for today's deep dive into the Bartesaghi story. Remember, this is a rumor at this stage. We'll keep you updated as more information emerges. If you enjoyed this analysis, please hit that like button and subscribe to Arsenal Daily News for your daily dose of Arsenal transfer news and tactical analysis. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.